coming from UCLA's parapsychology lab, when you got a call like this, or once you determined you weren't going to stamp a P for psychiatric case on something, and you were really going to go investigate it, how did you gear up to go do that? What kind of a team would get together, and what would you take with you?
Well, first, I mean, this was back in the 70s. We were very limited compared to what we can do now, but we bring cameras with, we bring various instruments. I mean, sometimes we bring magnetometers, sometimes electrometers, I mean, frequency counters, image intensifiers, which are like night vision scopes, thermal imaging systems, which is infrared video. We're trying to document visually as much as we can, and frequently we have the people living in the environment, if it's so suggestive, take, psychological tests.
Sure.
To determine what kind of profile we're dealing with. And if it's really blatant and obvious, we don't do that because, we see the history right in front of us. That's what we usually bring with, and now, because we have very modern camcorders, digital handycams, and beta cams, and we bring all of that with, because if we can't document the investigation visually, it has no value. I mean, it's just like the fish that got away.
Well, yes, but of course you have a number of people there, so you have witnesses.
Well, witnesses, like in the Anthony case, are very important, but it doesn't even compare to
photographic evidence.
Well, videotape. And unfortunately today, with modern technology, anything can be faked. And people always say, well, that can be done on a computer. That's CGI work. And I said, well, just because something can be faked doesn't mean the real event, it didn't occur. That's like saying because we can make a movie about going to the moon and make it look like we were really there, that we never went with Apollo.
Well, yes, but when you add eyewitness testimony, multiple eyewitness testimony, and photographic evidence,
right,
then it seems to me it gets pretty hard for the debunkers.
Right, and then on top of it, with the Tafff case, is a crew from Strange Universe went down to her original house in San Pedro, a little bungalow, and we assumed this case was a poltergeist case because it kept following Jackie. So they went down to her original house to shoot the B-roll for a show that just aired the other night, and they entered the house to just take some video, and their equipment died. And they came outside, the equipment came back out. They went back in, the equipment died again, came back outside, came back out again, and they just never had that happen before. And this is what happened to us when we were there back in '89. So it means there's something in that house or in that environment that's affecting the electronics of the camera or the battery.
Do you think affecting in the sense that it? I recall what you said about the background radiation disappearing, which is really weird. I would have thought radiation would increase with the presence of something emitting energy, but just the opposite occurred. Even the background radiation disappeared.
Would be endothermic, meaning it absorbs energy rather than
exactly. So the key question is, were the batteries run down?
No, the batteries were not run down. I reviewed our last show, and your question was, was everything normal afterwards? In fact, yes, it was. The batteries were perfectly charged, the camera worked fine once it was out of that state. Now, what's interesting is that from a haunting perspective, haunting seemed to affect the physical environment. Poltergeist seemed to be around people. Now, we assume this was, a haunting. So, first poltergeist case because it was following Jackie, and now it looks like her original house is affected, which certainly throws a wrench into our theory. But again, if she can go to someone's house and then leave it, and phenomena breaks up, that suggests that she's acting like a capacitor, and she's charging up the environment. When she leaves, people trigger the effect. In fact, she visited Barry Conrad's house in the middle of last year to look at the additional footage we were putting together for the video. And while she was sitting there, one of the glass doors on Barry's entertainment center just flew off and dropped right in the middle of the room for no apparent cause. It's never done that before. So again, what's the source? And it's always when she's anxious and nervous and kind of wired.
And it must build on itself. In other words, once something like that occurs, whatever level of anxiety you had just went through the roof.
Right. It's a feedback loop. It's like a closed loop that the anxiety and the stress creates more, perhaps adrenaline in the body, which then pumps this thing out even further. But again, that's assuming it's poltergeist. It's like a kinetic phenomenon. If the house is still affected, which certainly suggests that it is, what's there? Is this like a psychovirus where it infects the environment energetically? You come in the environment, and if you're
is your best guess? A monster from the id creating all of this around somebody, or something external?
I wouldn't even guess. I wouldn't even want to guess.
Or maybe both.
Pardon?
Maybe both.
Yeah, it's like we're like the three blind men touching different parts of the elephant. Depending on what part we're touching, we describe it differently. But we don't know. It's an unknown cause. I don't know.
You know all the trouble they've had at Denver International Airport?
Right, on sacred ground.
Yeah, that airport was built on native ground against the advice of many. And, of course, their luggage system, $1 billion worth, and all the rest of it. They've had so much trouble there. That would suggest a haunting, wouldn't it?
Well, suggest that it's a space that's built on sacred ground. And we've had numerous cases of hauntings in that environment. And it seems like there's some sort of force there that disrupts electromechanical, electronic activity.
Is it from the ground, or is it the building itself?
I think it's the space, because we've had cases where old houses that were haunted were torn down and new condos or homes were built, and the new condos or homes were haunted. So it suggests that the space is affected, whether it's from the ground or it's some sort of space-time anomaly. I don't know. I don't know. But you know what's interesting, as I said when I was on Greenland, we've had a number of cases that began as poltergeist manifestations and evolved into abduction, and others that started as abduction and evolved to poltergeist, would suggest that the encounter with one alters you in some way to make the next one much more likely. What that means, I don't know.
Is there a way, I know this sounds dumb, but I inevitably get faxes asking, believe it or not, there are people who want this kind of thing to happen to them.
Well, that's like wanting to lose control of your nervous system or develop incompetence.
Yeah.
It's the most disruptive thing that could happen, and beyond the physical turmoil and stress, if you start telling your friends and neighbors about it, and family, you're going to lose them very quickly because they're going to assume you're out of your mind. People still have a tremendous skepticism about this.
Having said that, though, are there ways for the totally bizarre people out there who do want this to open yourself to this sort of thing?
I don't think there is. I think that there are certain profiles, certain types of people that are more prone to it than others. It may have to do with the way they're physically put together or emotionally put together, which, who knows how complicated that is. And it may have to do with certain environments they've come from or they're currently in. But I suggest that I've known too many people that have been in this area, either as researchers or as experiencers, that have literally come apart from the scene, and their life has been destroyed.
It is interesting you should say that. I spoke in the last interview I did with Ed Dames, again, the remote viewer, and he said, in the military program, one of the things we didn't talk about a lot, but that certainly occurred, was that a lot of the people who began to try and do this discipline ended up out of the program and psychologically damaged for life.
Right. A lot of the people that work with us, we were at UCLA, developed messianic complexes and frequently lost the ability to differentiate between reality and fantasy, and that's called psychosis.
Really?
And this is just dealing with, phenomena such as telepathy or precognition, remote viewing, whatever you want to call it, at a very simplistic mental level, so to speak. We're not even talking about a haunting or poltergeist or abduction. Asking to be abducted and having paranormal fallout is like asking to be repeatedly raped and then ridiculed in the press.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, to ask to be abducted, I'd run like hell. And
it's like saying, would you like to go into a physiology lab and to be poked and prodded by people who didn't care about your health or the pain that ensued, and then threw you back out there without any sedation or tranquilizer?
Do you think there may be a connection between what are known as abductions and the kind of paranormal activity that you have documented so well?
I think there is, in the sense that it seems that whatever forces are producing these abductions, and I'll talk about the ones that we assume to be true, not anyone that makes these claims. A lot of people are off the wall.
All right, Doctor, hold that answer. We'll be right back. This is CBZ.
West of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies at 1-800-825-5033. 1-800-825-5033. This is the CBC Radio Network.
It absolutely is. My guest is Dr. Barry Tafff, who worked with the parapsychology lab at UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute, investigating paranormal cases for 9 years. Some of the most famous ones, many of which have been made into movies or videos. Books have been written because they really happened. Do you believe? To Dr. Barry Tafff, and let's pick up where we left off. Abduction cases, paranormal phenomenon of the type that is documented in the photographs on my webpage, and I only have a few. There really are quite a few more, Doctor, I don't have, aren't there?
Yes, there are many more.
Many more.
Yes, the thing is, apparently, my best guess at this point, based on what I've been seeing and experiencing and reading about, is that whatever these forces are that are abducting people may use forces of nature, which we call paranormal, the way we use electromagnetism. And if they're doing so, then an encounter with these forces may in some way substantially alter us physically, emotionally, psychically, to where we then start producing phenomena independent of that source on our own.
So in other words, it may not be exactly the same thing at work, but it may be the same forces at play.
Right, they may have, found a way to artificially produce these forces we call paranormal through some electromagnetic or electromechanical means. We don't know, but we're looking at a very sophisticated technology, and we do know that electromagnetic forces can dramatically influence human behavior and performance.
All right, I want to pick back up on something else that I let hang. And that is, I mentioned that object that streaked through our upper atmosphere at 1/100th the speed of light. Could there be a connection between that and what I see in this photograph, these light objects, and the ones you talked about that traveled in excess of 200 miles an hour?
I would know. I wouldn't even guess unless you saw a lot more of those things coming to the atmosphere, and they always correlated with the onset of certain types of paranormal phenomena. But I will tell you one thing, that there has been a correlation seen between what's called geomagnetic perturbation and poltergeist outbreaks. This is where the Earth's magnetic field, the mean frequency, starts to oscillate and go up and down in harmonics due to either terrestrial influences or solar influences. And when these occur, they seem to trigger outbreaks of psychokinesis around the world.
Shouldn't these unusual areas of magnetic flux activity be very detectable?
Oh, they are, but we don't always have instruments running in all locations, and it seems to correlate with certain altitude, like altitude in certain areas of the Earth that are more prone to it than others. So you have to have your instruments running pretty much all the time.
Maybe it's like trying to catch a tornado. We have very unusual weather conditions. North America has a lot of tornadoes. Rarely although more and more lately, people do have cameras, but a tornado is a very strange thing that just dips down, might do tremendous damage and be gone in a matter of seconds.
Right.
And maybe this magnetic activity is similar in a way. In other words, a tornado of strange magnetic flux begins to occur, manifests for whatever period of time, and then is suddenly and as quickly gone.
Well, perturbations can last for long periods of time, but they vacillate, they fluctuate. It's not continuous. So depending on what causes them and their intensity or magnitude will determine, and of course how widespread it is, will determine the amount of psychokinetic manifestations again. So we're talking about the really macroscopic stuff, the poltergeist, not the little tiny stuff that in the laboratory. There's a very big difference between the two.
Are there particular hotspots that you're aware of on Earth?
Well, United Kingdom, for one, England, Ireland, Scotland, somewhere that seems to be a hotbed of activity, the Hawaiian Islands.
Really?
Yeah, the Philippines.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of what you want to call haunting poltergeist activity in those regions. why, but it could be because they've been kids on longer, there's been more activity there. Who knows? Or could be there's some kind of, hydromagnetic anomaly or geomagnetic anomaly.
All right, well, let's try the religious connection. Now, it would seem to me that if I were a very, very religiously devoted a person, and something like, I don't know, San Pedro or any of the other things occurred to me, I might interpret that as some religious manifestation or miracle. And I wonder how many things, right now, all across the earth, we're having these Marian apparitions and so forth. There's a lot of that going on right now. Connected?
Well, it's some of these obscure things people are seeing. I mean, they see a strange aberration of light in glass panes, and they immediately assume there's a religious implication. That's really stretching it. But there are other, phenomena which are much more distinct and direct. And it's really hard to say what the cause is, but it's since the beginning of probably 2 millennia ago, people have applied religious interpretations to these kinds of phenomena simply because they've been around since the dawn of human civilization, been recorded in one form or another, and it's only natural for people to reach to those lengths trying to explain something that they can't come to grips with.
Doctor, who does the kind of investigation today that you did in connection with UCLA then? Anybody doing that kind of thing now?
There are other people. There's Dr. William Rowe. He's in Georgia at college down there. There are some people on the East Coast. I can't remember all their names of it. There's up in San Francisco. There's a woman named Barbara Gallagher who worked with. I'm blanking out of the names here. There aren't many people left.
Well, I meant at the university level. In other words, are there any entire departments devoted to this sort of thing?
Well, no, we didn't have a department. Right? It's been clear we had a laboratory.
A lab, all right.
No department.
All right, a lab then, yeah.
There were stuff up at Stanford Research Institute, but they were doing just remote viewing. They weren't, focusing on, hauntings and poltergeists. Hauntings and poltergeists, there was people doing work, as I said, in Florida, there's people doing work, but it's not connected with universities anymore. That seems to be pretty much on the way out. I mean, there was work being done up in Orinda, California back in the 70s and 80s at the John F. Kennedy University by a number of researchers, but that ended.
All right, well, I'm going to ask you about something that's a shot in the dark here, but there's been documentation now of something that in popular culture is being called the chupacabra.
Oh, yeah.
However, while there's a lot of laughing that is associated with it, there are also hundreds, maybe thousands, of dead animals. And I watch Telemundo and some of the other Spanish channels. And I'm going to tell you, I've seen them. These animals have had all of the blood removed from them, bites in the necks, all the blood gone. Even bats, which are vampires, do not actually suck blood from their victims. They bite and they lap it up. There is, as far as I know, no known animal that actually drains blood. And there have been hundreds or even thousands so drained. What in the world, or beyond it, could do something like that?
Well, I mean, on the more prosaic level, you could say it could be a very elaborate hoax on the part of who knows whom, to stir up fear and anxiety and tension, and especially in Puerto Rico.
It's working.
It could be it could be something, some type of one of my friends who has a chupacabra site up, said it's a hybridized alien, earth animal that's going around doing its thing, and again, possibly scare people, or it's some type of, cryptozoological creature that we're unfamiliar with, or it's some extraterrestrial. But there was an article in the LA Times about this, and there was some articles on some of the cable channels, and they said a lot of the experiences, in terms of people citing it, were pretty much explained away when they really researched it. A lot of people broke down that they didn't see what they claimed they saw, but there have been legitimate sober people who did see things that they can't explain. So I think it's the basis, the basis for all this. There may be some base truth in the essence of it, but I think it, like with everything else, gets blown out of proportion, exaggerated, embellished over time.
doctor, to measure whether there are more unexplained parapsychological type things going on today than last year or a decade ago or 2 decades ago, or can you graph it into peaks and valleys of activity?
Well, since there's no central clearinghouse for documenting it, no one actually compiling all this data in a database,
Right.
In a sense that people can really, isolate it and identify it and do longitudinal studies. The closest thing that I read in the paragraph was they called it central premonition registry that existed with Robert Nelson in New York, I think in the 60s and 70s, maybe even through the 80s. But that was only focused on premonitory visions or dreams. The paranormal is such a wide girth of phenomena associated with it that it's really hard to say. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily expect a correlation between psychokinetic phenomena and the more mental phenomena like remote viewing or precognition or telepathy, because they're two different things.
Has your investigation, all these years of work in this area, drawn you, have you drawn any conclusions? Let me ask that. In other words, would you say these things are coming from disturbed people, or that there is absolutely documentation of an external force that is present?
You're talking about the hauntings and poltergeists?
Yes, sir.
I think it's both. I think that there's no question that a significant portion of the phenomena, such as poltergeist, is psychokinetically generated. It comes from living human agents. And there's a small portion of the phenomena that strongly suggests that there's something that's either stored in time and space and can play itself back, or perhaps even discarnate nature, that something, some form of intelligence or cohesive information survives that can somehow interact with the people.
If I were to ask you about the nature of time itself, I wonder what you would say. I've always sort of felt that time is our invention.
Well, I would say it's holographic.
Holographic?
In the sense that if precognition is real, and if we can perceive events that have not yet occurred, and the accurate information is very precise and accurate, it's not inferred or deduced, then that implies that the future, at least informationally, at some level, must exist. And my belief is that, and this is from the remote viewing work and some of the other research we did, that all of time's information is contained in all of space. So all parts, all sections of space contain all information of all space and all time. The same way, if you take a little piece of a hologram, it recreates the whole. Not the event, but the information that makes up all of space and all time is contained in each section of space and time.
Somebody once described it to me this way. See if you like this. Imagine a highway, and you're in one car, and 5 miles ahead of you or 10 miles ahead of you, there's another car and a truck and blah, 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 on down the line. Well, in that car, at ground level, you can only see to the immediate horizon. You don't know there's a car and a truck 5 and 10 miles ahead of you, but if you were in a helicopter, you would see your car plus all the others way out ahead, sort of in a timeline.
But see, that's linear.
That's linear.
And this holographic is more three-dimensional. We're actually four-dimensional. What I'm getting at is the information about tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next year, the next decade, that information is contained in today's space, just as all of yesterday's information is contained in today's space. The information about the space in Hawaii is contained in this space. That would be a holographic distribution of information. It's equally distributed.
I had one occurrence in my life of absolute, unquestioned precognition. Once. Never repeated, didn't know how it began. I couldn't reproduce it. It's never happened again, but no question about it. It was precognition. Now, you're right. That has got to tell us something about time. To be able to know something is going to happen and then have it happen tells us something about time, doesn't it?
Well, it also tells us that, it suggests that there are multiple futures where there are an infinite number of branching alternatives, but it's much simpler than that, in the sense that the future that you perceive either occurs as you saw it, occurs in a distorted fashion because you didn't see it accurately, or doesn't occur at all.
that it will ever be possible to, in essence, travel in time in either direction?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do. I think time is a dimension is real, and it's true as the other three dimensions we live in. It's just that we don't know how to manipulate it yet.
Well, okay, then inevitably, once you answer a question like that, people will say then, is it not possible that people from some future date when this has been figured out are visiting here?
Well, but it may not work like a movie either. It may not work, if we had a time machine today, theoretically, based on what we do know, you couldn't go back and interact with the past where you never were. You could go back and watch it.
Observe.
You couldn't interact because your atoms your body didn't exist then. And you would alter the timeline. If you go forward, let's say if you jump 20 years forward, and no problem, theoretically. But you can't then come back and relive those 20 years because you weren't here.
So as long as you can't interact with the past,
And violate what's called a world line.
then there is not that problem that everybody always discusses about, changing something or killing your father, all those stories.
Right. We're not creating a cheap science fiction film. Basically, in most films, there's these incredible breakdowns in logic that just don't hold up. But theoretically, time should be as easily traveled at some level as space is. It's just that we haven't found out how to do it.
All right. When we do find out how to do it, and I am talking to some people right now who are very seriously working on a machine to move in time, do you think it will be a mechanical, electrical device that will allow this? Or do you think it will be a mental process?
Well, if we travel mentally through time, there's no way that's like remote viewing. I mean, it's like, or like an out-of-body experience for that matter. It's very subjective. I think that we will develop a machine that somehow produces artificial gravity, that produces the equivalent of an artificial wormhole or rotating black hole. And by creating a warped space that we can rotate at a certain speed, we will be able to move through time.
In other words, a real-time machine.
A real time machine, but the amount of energy required might be beyond anything we can comprehend. And, I think we have a better chance of building interstellar starships than we
Well,
build a time
do
machine.
you recall the stories of the experiments that allegedly took place called the Philadelphia experiment?
Oh, yes.
All right, I've had it technically described to me pretty well, and they used tremendous magnetic fields with rotating RF fields to produce what apparently is alleged to have occurred. So maybe interaction of different types of fields may bridge the necessity for the kind of energy that you're otherwise imagining might be needed. Could that be?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a unified field theory application.
Yes.
Which is, theoretically it's great, but I don't know if anyone's accomplished it. I do know in the Philadelphia experiment they were trying for radar visibility, and what they achieved was optical visibility, among other things. So it's the physics behind this are probably locked away somewhere on the wall now, like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Do you think that, did you ever look into it at all?
I read a lot of material on it, some of which I believe, a lot of it I don't believe. I mean, some of the claims are really outrageous, but I think that some of the material, the basis for the Eldridge and all that in 43, and magnetic degaussers and everything, I would be surprised if that occurred.
Right.
I could see the government, actually working with that technology.
Again, they would certainly want that, be looking for that anyway to cloak ships which were, of course, being on a regular basis sunk by German submarines.
Right.
I can imagine they would. Absolutely fascinating. All right. I would like to open the lines, which have been ringing solidly since we began, but I had so many questions for you. Are you open to answering some questions from the audience?
Yeah, I think it's getting almost 2 o'clock. I say the most another half hour, I think.
All right. Let me do that then, and stand by. We'll get right back to you. Absolutely Fresh Flowers is a flower farm in Southern California. All they do is grow miniature carnations. If there is a woman in your life, I guarantee you can please her with a shipment of these flowers. I really mean it. Trust me on this one. It's $42.95. And for that money, you get this giant shipment of flowers in a large triangular box. Little card in there, handwritten, your message, your name at the bottom, and it all arrives next day. Boom, FedEx. You call tonight, they deliver tomorrow. Well, you call today, they deliver tomorrow. The number is 1-800-562-6438. That's 1-800-562-6438.
On the wildcard line at 702-727-1295. That's 702-727-1295. First-time callers can reach Art Bell at 702-727-1222. 702-727-1222. Now, here again, Art Bell.
Once again, here I am, the principal investigator on the case became known as the Entity. Many other cases. Dr. Barry Tafff is my guest. For 9 years, he worked in the parapsychology lab at UCLA. We'll get right back to him in your calls. Dr. Tafff, and by the way, if you want to get a copy of this program, beginning now, you can call 1-800-917-4278. That's 1-800-917-4278. Before we begin, Doctor, with the calls, you've got a videotape. I guess it's not out yet.
Yeah, probably sometime late spring or summer. And it's a 95-minute video called An Unknown Encounter that documents and chronicles our investigation of the St. Peter case. It covers pretty much the entire case.
Since it's not out yet, when it does come out, how will people get it? Video stores or?
In all video stores. Will be sold through specialty catalogs all across the country. And I'm trying to think, it may even go into what's called point of purchase displays in stores like Thrifty's, Save On.
And it's
depends on distribution.
And what is the title going to be?
An Unknown Encounter.
An Unknown Encounter. So everybody needs to watch for that. All right. To the phones quickly, I guess. First-time caller line. You're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Where are you calling from, please?
I'm calling from Kentucky.
All right.
I was wondering, does he have an 800 number or any number or address we could talk, to write to him personally?
Good question. Doctor?
I have a number I can give out, but I should tell you that I can't. If you're looking for help in terms of for us to come out and do work with you out there, we're not funded. We're funded out of our own pockets, so we can't do work outside of this area because we don't have the means to do it financially. But I will give out my number.
Okay.
310-273-2864.
Okay, give it again, please.
310-273-2864.
All right. Do you still have equipment and personnel who would be willing to participate with you, assuming somebody would fund an investigation?
Oh yes, we have. That's not a problem. The only thing is that some of the higher end equipment we don't own. We have to rent, and it's extremely expensive.
Sure.
We only bring that in if the case warrants it.
I understand. All right. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff.
Hello. Hi, Art.
Hi.
I'm Dr. Tafff. This is a genetically submutated human being abandoned from being non-usable from the ETs. I believe from various books I've read, Barry, that there's a constant flow of star people of different origins that engage in warfare and simultaneous genetic experiments. 77% of the ghost experiences, I think, are due to ET-related experiences.
Well, that's what we were discussing earlier, whether there was a relationship, and the doctor apparently feels there is some kind of relationship, or if at least at the level of the energies that are utilized. Correct?
Well, more more to the point that apparently an encounter with one increases your probability of having an encounter with another. Beyond that, it's only speculation.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Tafff.
Where are you, sir?
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Boston. All right.
A Kirlian photography camera would be very helpful for your work because it shows the energy, the spirits, and also, like, as well as for haunted places, you can bring it to slaughterhouses where your animals are slaughtered and show spirits, and you can bring it to places where unwanted animals are slaughtered during the time of slaughter and show spirit. And if you bring it to a hospital where someone is going to die soon, then when the flat line gets on the machine and the beep stops, it signifies death. You can turn the camera on and show the spirit leave the body. Do you plan to try that?
Well, when I worked at UCLA, we were doing a lot of work with Kirlian photography, and I personally, based on the research that's come out, I think that Kirlian photography is basically corona discharge, and what mediates or modulates the image is moisture, or the lack of it. So I don't subscribe to the notion that it's a way to monitor not physical energy. That's my personal opinion.
So you think that what is picked up by Kirlian photography is what?
It's basically high voltage, high frequency electrical energy that travels over the skin through the skin effect, and it goes to ground, which is where the film is. And what modulates the image is moisture or the lack of it. And anything that alters the physiology, emotion, whatever, will alter that image. There's no mystery about it. There was a great work conducted through the funding of DARPA at a friend of mine did back in Boston.
Does it have diagnostic
potential? It has diagnostic potential, but it's a metastable phenomenon in the sense that there's too many variables affecting the outcome to control, and therefore it's never been adequately developed for that reason.
Okay, I understand. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
Hi, this is Dan from the Republic of Fremont in Como Country.
Yes, sir. Way up north.
Way up north. Dry it out. I had a couple thoughts. One is a correlation to, you'd mentioned some possibility of opening oneself through investigating these things to inviting these things to happen in your life subsequently.
Yes.
And that reminded me of Malachi Martin's replay the other night.
Yes.
And a question was, it came to mind that he spoke, Dr. Tafff spoke of possibly the telekinetic energy of the women in the entity causing the apparition. And I was wondering if he'd thought of or investigated the possibility of the telekinetic energy from her 3 children actually, a la the psychic vampire discussion previously on Dreamland,
Sure.
Coming into play there.
All right.
That's an excellent question.
I'll listen on the air.
That's an excellent question. I thank you for asking it. We assume that the manifestation might have been caused by an interplay, psychokinetic interplay between Mrs. B and her 3 male children, as I implied. The implication of having 3 children and the volatile relationship and whatever incestuous, libido, all of that involved at a psychokinetic level theoretically could have produced such a manifestation. But again, that's almost as weird as saying an alien did it. So, I mean, but it's intriguing that you were the first people that's ever asked me that in any talk show. So I'm impressed by that question.
All right. First time caller line. You're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Where are you calling from, please? Hello there. I can barely hear you, sir. Something wrong with your line. I'm sorry. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Whoops, would have been west of the Rockies. You're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Where are you calling from, please?
This is Jake in Yakima.
Hello, Jake.
Thought maybe that cursed dog got you last night.
Yeah, maybe.
Morning, Dr. Tafff.
Good morning.
I heard you talking earlier about doppelgangers.
Right.
I wonder if you had heard the story of the German poet Goethe seeing his own doppelganger.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Is there a lot of cases of actually seeing a physical manifestation of yourself?
Oh yeah, we had a case in 1992 in the Lincoln Heights area where they were seeing the young child. The family saw the child when they knew where he was over to the left, and they saw him over to the right. But he wasn't even home. They saw him running around. That was doppelganger.
the one you talked about before was on the phone,
Was
right?
a girl was auditory, it wasn't visual.
But there are some that are actual visual.
Well, like I said, the one case we had in 92 in Lincoln Heights, they actually saw the child when he wasn't there. He was at school, he was miles away, yet they saw his apparition going around the house.
Is there ever any interaction with the visual?
Oh yeah, sometimes they actually think it's the real child, the real person, and they don't even know it until it disappears on them.
But when you were talking about the one where the girl was heard on the phone,
Right.
you said that they spoke to her and she responded.
Yeah, they spoke to her, heard her voice, she talked to them, she knew every little detail
Is there that kind
about
of
her double life.
interaction with the visual too?
Yeah, that's so mind-boggling. It seems to destroy so many theories that one might otherwise have about these kind of entities. That it could interact that way is really chilling.
Well, it's an extension of the human psyche. It should possess all the, capabilities at some level.
It implies a consciousness, though, a consciousness of this separate, if it is separate, entity.
There have been out-of-body experiences where people have bilocated. They've been physical in two places at once, so I guess this might be an extension of that.
A first-time caller line, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
Hi, this is Dave from Danville.
Yes, sir.
Listen, I'm calling because I'm listening with total fascination. First of all, it's great to be on your show here talking to you, Art Bell. You're doing a real service to people across the country.
Thank you.
In any case, listening to Dr. Barry Tafff and his case studies there brought to mind a incident that happened back in 1974. I was a junior officer in the Army, stationed at Fort. And it kind of leads me to a question to your two guests there, and that is, in talking with a guy that lived next door to me in the officer quarters, he was telling me about the paranormal activity that occurred at West Point, and it was really super fascinating, and also quite frightening. The guy had indicated that they were conducting seances and things at West Point there, and things that happened like the windows would fly open and they hear loud steps across the roof. In addition, there were things like activities like ghosts or apparitions that would appear in the cadet quarters that were well documented. Now, one could say, for example, that, well, this is this guy's account. But I went and talked to other cadets, graduates from the academy, and they had the same explanations and same observations and knew of these things that were going on. And I was wondering, this leads me to the question to Dr. Tafff, is listening to your case studies, obviously you picked up a lot of experience and that kind of stuff in the field of studying the paranormal. Have you taken that to places like West Point and tried to use that to investigate activities there?
All right.
I think I remember hearing something about what you just discussed, but unless we're invited out to the area to conduct investigation, you just can't go walking.
You can't just go walking into West Point.
In fact, sometimes they get very angry if you even attempt to do that.
Well, let me tell you something. The caller may be on to something, though, because I was in the Air Force, one of the least strict services. However, at Lackland Air Force Base, I went through basic training. And what they attempt to do in basic training is to break you. In other words, they want to separate the wheat from the chaff. Those who will be able to stand up and those who will crumble. And inevitably, a lot of people crumble. And they are taken to the emotional edge of human endurance, psychologically. So it would not surprise me, with those kind of emotions being churned all the time, that there would be things that would occur at those basic training centers. Does that make sense?
That and the opposite end of it as well, the discipline that goes into developing a real good soldier at a military academy might enable or endow the individual with enough force of mind to produce phenomena psychokinetically.
Exactly. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
Hello, my name is Tom. I'm calling from Omaha.
Hello, Tom.
Yes, I've had a lot of experience with photography, and the only one picture I wanted to address is the one with the arc over the head.
Right.
Doctor, it was examined by who?
The West Coast editor of Popular Photography by the name of Adrian Vance examined our negatives.
And
His conclusion was he could find no explanation to account for those images.
all right, well, I can take a photograph, and I can scan it, and I could probably, with work, fake, as that caller pointed out, but certainly not on the negative. And if that was examined, then not a fake. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
Hi. I had a question about the barometric pressure with the eardrum thing.
Right.
Right. That's happened to me a couple of times. And I was just wondering if that's something that, like, I'm just going cuckoo, or if that's something that...
Well, unless you're in an environment where there's other phenomena present, there's a number of reasons that can cause, the eardrums or the station tube pressure changes, and it may have nothing to do with anything paranormal.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that in these environments, we seem to encounter it. So it may work in one direction, but not in another.
Where are you?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Denver. All right, thank you very much. Everybody has experienced that, what you call overpressure, but going up and down hills, but not too much just sitting at home.
Right.
First time caller line, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
This is Brian, boys.
Hello, Brian.
I'm wondering about the alien hand syndrome. Do you know anything about that?
The alien hand syndrome.
Yes.
I don't know anything about what are
Is that
you
where
talking
people claim their hand isn't their own and it sort of does things uncontrollably?
It's when there's a disease.
Well, I only know just very little about that, so I really can't comment.
All right. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hello.
Yes, hi, Aaron. Dr. Tafff.
Hi.
I was just wondering, when I was younger, about 4 years old, I experienced a haunted house. My parents moved into an older two-story home, and I lived with the doors rattling, with somebody walking around upstairs when I was downstairs, and it really terrified me. And it seemed to be attached to the ground because my parents built a brand new house next door, and the whole event seemed to move over there to their new house.
If it moves over to their new house, then it could be attached to the people, which would suggest it would be more psychokinetic. But without it looking into the background of the property and doing profiles of the people, it's really hard to determine what the nature or source of it is.
Doctor, are you still driven to investigate things? You said you still would, though you don't have funding for it.
Well, we
Still
investigate cases locally. If they're local in the Southern California area, we will do our best to get out and investigate them, especially if they're active. If there are other parts of the country, we just don't have the means to do it because you have to travel, you got to pay for your time,
Sure.
equipment.
Well, I meant on a personal level. Do you still feel driven to do this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, unquestionably, we see cases out constantly.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Dr. Tafff. Hi.
How you doing?
How you
I
doing?
got a comment about the Philadelphia experiment.
Sure, where are you?
I'm in Medina, Ohio,
All right.
south of Cleveland.
Yes, sir.
I was about 6 years ago. I was bartending, and I met a guy. He came in the bars on a Sunday afternoon. There was nobody there, and he was telling me about the Philadelphia experiment. He was in the service or worked for the government somehow, and he investigated it. I'm not exactly sure what he did, but he's telling me he saw pictures of the actual ship or whatever it was with the people fused to into the ship. He saw movies, like a 8mm film, I guess, of it, of the actual people,
Yes.
like after it happened.
Yes.
The ones that lived in mental, I guess they're in mental institution, he was saying, for a while. And it was, I believed him. The way, just the conversation I had with him, it seemed like he was a pretty credible person. And that's pretty much my comment about it.
All right, sir. I appreciate your comment, but there's not a lot that can be said. I've always wondered, I think something really did go on with the Philadelphia experiment. That's clear. But if that many people were injured or killed, you would think that there would be certainly records of some kind, although I guess our Pentagon can manipulate whatever they want, and people can be reported killed in various ways. I don't know. And I'm sure you don't either, Doctor.
No, it's like Roswell, the same thing. I mean, I'm sure there were records about what happened there, but they're mysteriously non-existent.
Non-existent. Missing. Actually, there's a lot of records that were absolutely absolutely, when a Representative Schiff did the investigation, he found they had destroyed, I don't know how many records of only that particular period.
But how convenient.
How convenient. Doctor, what a pleasure it has been to have you on the program.
That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
And I suppose it's way past your bedtime.
Yeah, it's a little late here.
All right. Dr. Tafff, thank you. I'm sure we will continue to talk of this throughout the evening. We'll do it again sometime. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
That's Dr. Barry Tafff. And again, to get a copy of this program, 3.5 hours, I guess it was, eh?